Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another special episode of Brainstorm Brewery. I'm Corbin Hostler, joined as always by Douglas DJ Johnson and Jason E. Alt. That's us. We are barely cracking a beer anyways. That is the brew. Yeah, that's the brewery part of the brew crew right there. Welcome in.
If I don't drink beer, then Corbin will make decks. You're welcome. I'm destroying my liver to make this podcast listenable. You're welcome.
It is true that 400 something episodes ago, we had the brains. I don't even know what the brainstorm part of the podcast was per se, but we did attempt to brew decks. That was a title. That was a segment we had, and that was very bad. So you're all welcome that you're listening to this episode and not that one. And we got a lot to talk about this week. I don't know if you heard, but Wizards banned Pioneer. No one, nothing anyone played in that format will ever be played again. So on to the next thing. They actually banned a ton of stuff in every format. We're going to get into it later. There's a lot to break down, and
10 cards are not legal in Standard.
That's there's a lot to it. They talked about it being an experiment because of the nature of the pandemic, people only playing online, blah blah. We'll get into all of that tonight, along with all of our regular segments. But first,
there was a secret layer equivalent exchange where they're like, "We will give you 10 secret layer cards, but you must sacrifice 10 things."
Yeah, we'll finally ship your secret. We'll ship your secret layers. I promise. In exchange, you have to give up 10 cards.
And we were happy to get rid of 3 fairy.
Yeah. Well, I do want to. You all might have noticed last week on the podcast we had a very special guest, and it was Clippy. You familiar with Clippy?
The paperclip from Windows?
Uh-huh. That's who I imagine, in my head anyways, this is my headcanon, you can't tell me I'm wrong on this. That's who delivered DJ's Pick of the Week last week.
I thought it was Alexa.
Nah. Clippy. Alexa's everywhere.
Only 90s kids.
Yeah, we were on quite the nostalgia 90s kickback. We recorded some after hours before the show. So yeah. Anyway, so as it turns out, sometimes when you stream for hours and then podcast for hours, at the end, you're just like, what is a content? And that's how you ended up with the post-edit DJ robotic voice last week for the Pick of the Week. So we want to thank Clippy for coming on the show last week. And we'll see him again in the future, maybe. Anyways,
they're going to get a Jason robot voice because I haven't been recording for the past minute. So.
That's why we have a backup.
That's why there was like a picture of me. You could hear my voice, but you couldn't see my face. It's because I was getting handsome for all of you. I don't just roll out of bed looking like this. It takes a lot of time and work, and I was in hair and makeup for an hour, and whatever.
Yeah,
we're a professional podcast.
Crafty was down.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. So first things first, let's jump into Sudden Substitution. This is our segment where we take some expensive commander cards and we give you some budget alternatives for them. So this week, I want to talk about, this is a relevant card with the reprint, the Stoneforge, and now the Masterpiece version of this, but Sword of Feast and Famine.
We picked the card after it was reprinted because we know that it'll still be very expensive.
Yeah, it's Sword of Feast and Famine is going to be pricey for sure. Now, we've looked at this.
I saw on the internet that the set isn't worth buying, so the price probably isn't going to go down because no one will have bought it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an expensive card. So we have 3 options for you that can accomplish at least some of what the Sword of Feast and Famine does. Obviously, it's an equipment. It's a very unique card, but there are some other options that give you some of the effects that Sword of Feast and Famine is typically played for. So, Jason, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Well, this gives you +2/+2 and untap all lands you control, which is not pro-black and they discard a card, but it is, for
it's pretty good.
For $8, It's pretty close. So my
what
card
is
Bear Umbra.
Bear Umbra.
A Bear Umbra has totem armor, so if they destroy the creature, the Bear Umbra falls off, and the creature stays alive, which is useful. Sword can't do that. And Bear Umbra's used in a lot of Voltron decks, but it's also just a card you can just throw on the Hellkite Charger and just kill them.
Yeah.
Because you untap all your lands and get another combat phase, etc. It's you don't even have to connect. It's just when the creature attacks. So there's a lot to like with Bear Umbra. So it was in the Estra deck. Yeah, the Commander 2018 Bantchantress Estra deck. So it got a little cheaper, and we said, hey, that's a card to watch because it's flirted with $10 before. So if those get real cheap, buy a bunch, and I hope you did.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's approaching $10 on some sites, and it's like the cheapest I've seen it is around $8. So it's not exactly a budget card per se, but it is much cheaper than a Sword of Feast and Famine, and it does a really good impression of it.
That's right. Next card I'm going to talk about does obviously something similar, and this one is a little more pricey, but we know that not everyone watching this has the same budget. So if you are interested, Nature's Will is a very powerful card that clocks in a little less than the Sword of Feast and Famine. Now, not a lot. Nature's Will is pretty pricey. It's $15 to $20, but it's very good. It's a enchantment from Kamigawa, and it's 4 mana. Whenever one or more creatures you control do combat damage to a player, tap all lands they control and untap all lands you control. You're getting something for putting this card into your deck, right? That is incredibly powerful. Now, the creature does have to connect. It's a little different than the others, but I'll tell you, tapping all lands
has to connect. Like,
right?
Can throw 4 things at them, and then if one token gets through, you get 65 mana.
Yeah, and you tap all of theirs, which is insane. So, big fan of that one. All right, DJ.
So I have another 4 mana green enchantment, Wilderness Reclamation. This is a card that is a little powerful, as
banned everywhere.
Wizards may have realized this recently. But Wilderness Reclamation, 4 mana at the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. I played Sword of Feast and Famine in a Skullbriar deck, just really wanting to aggressively get in there, keep up tempo, and then still have mana to play tricks, removal, pump spells, fight spells, all that stuff. And Wilderness Reclamation does the same thing. It's obviously mana efficient in the turn you play it, and then it'll just continue to generate value for you and let you leave up mana for counter spells, Cyclonic Rifts, all that crazy good stuff. And it's $1, so I mean, it's just in terms of power to money ratio, it is pretty high up there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving on, let's talk about the big news. The bans, they are all over the place. Standard, Wilderness Reclamation is banned, Growth Spiral is banned, Teferi is banned, Cauldron Familiar is banned, Pioneer combo is banned, Inverter of Truth, Kethis, Ballista, Breach. It's 4 different combo decks in Pioneer. Every one of them got basically an irreplaceable piece hit. Historic, Wilderness Reclamation, and Teferi, we're talking about 3 mana Teferi here, suspended. So in Historic, that's basically a test run. In a month or two, they'll either move it to to banned or off the suspended list and to legal again. And in Brawl, they banned Teferi. Effective date, August 3rd. Immediately.
How would something come off the suspended list if they don't have any data from people playing it to determine?
I don't know. We don't know about Historic.
How do they put it into play without any time counters?
This is just a crazy announcement. I mean, I thought that they would not ban anything in Standard. They tipped us
off last time they had significant changes. There's
there was no announcement for an announcement this time. It was just Monday rolled around and they just threw it up there. There was no 7 days from now countdown to the launch thing. It was just woke up, boom, post it.
Just a weekend full of people complaining about tournament results, and then
well, and here's the thing to know about the announcement. Everybody's like, these bans, blah, blah, blah. I think it is important to recognize that, and this is going to be in no way a defense of Wizards' design decisions here. This is just an explanation of why this is happening and what they said. They said specifically, basically, this is happening because everyone's only playing on Arena. Paper events aren't really happening. There's no GPs. There's no big tournaments. So what that tells me is that one of the concerns when they ban cards is people who lose out on it, people who spend a bunch of money on a deck and then get it banned away. And while that is always going to be a possibility, it's much less likely to be the case in the middle of the pandemic when everyone's just playing on Arena and they can give everyone wild cards to replace them. So they said publicly in the announcement that that's why they were doing this. because they wanted to see, because they recognize that they don't have all the same constraints that they have on them in a different time. So were there no pandemic going on, I don't believe they would have banned any of these cards, because they're about to rotate, right? This is a month and a half, 2 months away. Rotation's going to be, it looks really bad to ban 4 cards in that time period. But I think what they're doing is they want to get an idea of what they're going to be looking at post-rotation. So they're banning the pillars of the format, essentially. I mean, Growth Spiral, that's insane for that card to be on a ban list. It's just unreal.
Uro's the
Cauldron
problem.
Yeah, Uro's the problem, exactly. But Cauldron Familiar is getting banned too. That deck's not even good right now. Now, obviously, they think it will be good once Reclamation is gone. But yeah, they're just ripping the Band-Aid off. All the cards people hate, they're gone. See what happens. And they said that we're only doing this because people aren't playing in paper. Same goes for Pioneer. And in Pioneer, they said the same thing, but it's also a little different because they announced this publicly. And this is what's truly interesting about this whole thing is the reasons they gave for the bans. Standard, it's a power level ban, and they want to experiment with the format while everyone's playing online. Pioneer, they said these decks weren't even problematic. The Dimir Inverter deck, the Underworld Breach deck, these decks did not have problematic win rates. They were under 55%. However, it's hard to win rates don't mean much if no one's playing. And no one was playing Pioneer. And they said that because it's true. The number of people participating in Pioneer online is massively down. I put out a Pioneer video on Cool Stuff Inc. and it gets half the views that my Modern videos do. And it's not like Modern is a bastion of format health right now. So they said this is going to be the criteria for these Pioneer bans. People don't want to play against these cards. Okay, they're banned. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that approach?
I think it ultimately, they have fewer concerns right now because people are just crafting stuff with wild cards versus, actually being out money. So
I just mean the idea of banning things that are not problematic from a game balance perspective.
Because I think if they are going to be problematic, like it's the whole thing like, well, we introduced venomous snakes to deal with the wild rabbit population,
Sure.
So like, what happens if we get rid of the snakes? Should we ban the rabbits too? Sort of a deal, I guess.
Interesting. Okay.
So like, they know it'll be a problem later.
Okay. I kind of get that in Pine. I do. This is weird because it's almost like Wizards is pulling back the curtain a little bit. Usually they wrap these banning announcements up in a bunch of data and format health and all these words.
They owe us an explanation.
It's like they ripped the Band-Aid off here and we're like, you know what? We're going to level with you. Everyone hates this format. These cards are fine in the format, but no one wants to play them. And we want people to play Magic, so they're gone.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's wrong. That's certainly a mindset that it's obviously important to them from a business thing. And if you look back in history, standard bans back when they weren't something that they did every 2 weeks like they do now, it was something that they did every 5 to 10 years. It was incredibly rarely, and it almost exclusively would happen exclusively when in-store play dropped. No one played Magic when Affinity. The store play plummeted, so they got rid of it. Same thing. That also was problematic, but it was so problematic that people didn't want to play Magic, and that will get them to pull the trigger faster than anything else. We saw the same thing in Innistrad Kaladesh Standard, where Emrakul wasn't like problematic from a power level perspective. Reflector Mage certainly wasn't a power level concern, but people just hated playing against those cards. So they banned them, right? And I remember then reading at the time, it felt like they were kind of acknowledging that people weren't enjoying playing against these, and it wasn't solely a power level concern. But now they're full on. They say people don't like what Pioneer has become. You're going to get a new Pioneer.
So, I have a really, really interesting, what's the best way to put this? So, I've been playing a lot of Legends of Runeterra recently. For those who don't know, that is the Riot Games card game based off League of Legends in the Valorant sort of League of Legends, not Valorant, but like the League of Legends universe, so to say.
Designed by a lot of Magic.
Yeah,
players,
actually, like a lot of their live design team is ex Magic pros. Like Steve Rubin is the head of the live balance team.
I saw him post recently about that. Steve is awesome. For those who don't know, he's a former Pro Tour winner who is now making Runeterra.
And one of the premier content creators who I watch and respect and listen to a lot. his name is Swimstream. I highly recommend that you go check out at least one of the videos that I'm about to reference, because it's this super, super interesting, like 4 or 5 hour deep dive into game design theory, and a very large portion of it applies to Magic just directly because there's a lot of parallels between these two games. But there's a huge difference between like the concept of balancing based on win rates and power level versus like player perception.
Yeah.
And just as a whole, just this entire theory of balancing your game and your cards and adjusting power level based on win rates is just theoretically, like, just like at its core, just a poor way to go about things.
Because it doesn't matter, right?
Right, like, that's the core argument in this whole thesis that he presents, is that just, like, balance doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all just player perception and feeling. And that's the core of your game, and how that is just so fundamental to your game, and how just the entire idea of using data-driven win rates and statistics and play rates, and it's all just, like, mostly irrelevant in the long run if you ignore player perception. Because you can take a quote-unquote healthy format that has several decks at 50% win rate, and that could still be a very bad format. And like how tuning numbers on cards to make something, and I say tuning numbers on cards because Runeterra has the ability to be like, oh, this card has 1 more power, this card has 1 less toughness, this card has 1 more mana cost, whereas Magic can't really do that.
Have they had to do a lot of that, DJ? I haven't really messed with the game. Have they had to change a lot of cards since beta?
I wouldn't say that they've had to change a lot of cards. I think that the live balance patches have been very, very successful overall. The majority of the metagame has been very healthy. Obviously, the new game in its infancy, it's less than a year old in terms of the actual player ability to like contribute, and the card pool is smaller, so obviously there's differences there. But just the core as a ability to like tune numbers and dials and cards, Magic's version of this is like adding and removing cards from the card pool. Your entire philosophy just sort of falls flat if you're doing what Wizards has done before, which is just like grabbing cards out of the card pool and just chucking them behind you in a cartoonish style based on like, oh, this card's overpowered, now we have to whack-a-mole that, now we have to ban it, now we have to add this, now we have to unban that, and you're just constantly playing this catch-up game, whereas your true goal is to find a game state where the player interest is high enough, even if the win rates and play rates of decks and individual cards are just appear to be skewed. You can be like, oh, this card has like a 70% play rate across all red decks. That's absurd. This card shouldn't, but that doesn't matter at its core. Like, it's
because at the end of the day, Ian Duke wrote this announcement. At the end of the day, Ian Duke's job at Wizards of the Coast is not to balance standard. It's to make people want to play standard.
Right.
And those are not necessarily the same thing.
Yes,
that's a great point.
But yeah, like if I'm giving anybody homework who's listening to this podcast, regardless if you ever touched Runeterra or downloaded a Riot Games game, just like after you're done with this video, go look up like Swimstream game design theory or game theory. I don't know. Like I can have JJ throw something in the comments, but like it's just such a good like 5-hour lecture on game design as a whole. Yeah. And you're like, that's super dry. But no, it's just so core if you want to get better at Magic or just understand game design just as a whole. It's just so educational.
Well, a lot of Magic players read Mark Rosewater articles every single week. Right. Everybody out there wants to learn something about game design and think that whether their motivation is that they just want to learn or that they think they're going to do a better job than Wizards and want to prove them wrong. Again, whatever,
like there's interest. There's a really well done analogy that Mark Rosewater has written about in articles before. If you compare the relationship between players and game designers to like a doctor and a patient. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but
I haven't.
So players are not very good at understanding what problems are. They are very good at understanding when problems exist. And that's sort of similar to like a patient can walk into a doctor's office and say like, my arm hurts, but they don't know the core reason or understand. They don't know how to fix it.
They don't know which bone they
don't know anything about it. They just know this is wrong. Like something is wrong at its core. And players are good at that in terms of like they know like this format is bad. Yeah. And the expertise stops there in terms of like the player suggestions being like, oh, you need to ban this, you need to unban this, you need to buff this or nerf this, like that. Don't
listen to them.
The designer / doctor just has to ignore all of that Karen-esque feedback and just decipher what the actual problems in play perception are using the minute amount of correct information that a player can provide. Because they might be like, oh, my arm hurts, but it's actually like your collarbone or your shoulder or whatever.
Right.
It's all just deciphering the ability of the deck designer or the game designer to understand what feedback is correct and what to ignore.
Yeah, and the reason this is such an interesting topic is because, you say all of that. I agree that the perception matters almost in a lot of cases, maybe more than reality, but now we're going to move to Historic, where they suspended Teferi Time Raveler, a card that was not good. It's not in a busted deck. It wasn't in the Reclamation. It wasn't in all the, I don't know if it's in some of the Reclamation decks. Wasn't in some of the Reclamation decks. They said it shows up in like 20% of the matches or something. That's a percentage, but it's not a key card in a lot of ways. It's usually just a card. It's a card that no one helps playing. But I am salty because I have grinded months I've spent playing Kethis combo in Historic, and it's not been a good deck. It's not been a good deck at all. Okay? It was very medium. And more recent, we got Chromatic Sphere at some point. The deck became more playable. Imri, the deck became more playable. So on and so forth, right? And now the deck is a deck in Historic. It's by no means broken, by no means even good. It's probably not even in the top 4 or 5 decks in Historic, but it absolutely needed Teferi. So when I read them saying, we got the same feedback in Historic that we get in Standard, we find that the reduced capability for interaction scales with the power of the things he's protecting. For all these reasons, we are suspending Teferi. There's nothing there. They said that people don't like playing against Teferi.
But so
that's it. I get it, but that's so bad.
But the data they're looking at for that isn't like this deck has X% win rate against Y other decks.
I know.
The data they're looking at is X% of players don't play another arena game after X times facing this deck.
I mean, maybe, but her story. This is the difference, because this is what I want to get at. In their section for Pioneer, they specifically say, they are honest with the reader and say, no one is playing Pioneer. That's why we're doing this. Historic doesn't have that problem. People liked Historic. People love Historic. People have brewing up everything. Raph Levy went 7-0 on day 1 of the Arena Open, which you then play day 2 for cash with a treasure whatever deck, the 47 Islands deck or whatever it is, right? Oh, it was a Persistent Petitioners deck he played. He played 37 Islands, 23 Persistent Petitioners, and he got 7 wins. That's Historic. Teferi is not a problem. The card was in no broken decks. And I understand that people don't like playing against it. But what I'm saying is, as a player who spent the wild cards on that deck, and that required a lot of wild cards for things that are specifically in Historic that were not in Standard, so the only way I could get them was to craft them. And now they've essentially banned my deck out of existence because people didn't like playing against Teferi. And that's...
Right, and they're weighing...
That's how am I supposed to, as a consumer, how do I interact with that? How do I interact with, if Twitter hates a card enough, it'll get banned?
That's what they're doing as like a game designer. Is they're weighing the number of people in your situation versus the number of people who stop playing Arena after they see Teferi.
Well, then I'm asking for some transparency, because they gave us that transparency in Pioneer. They said that people aren't playing. They didn't say anything like that for Historic. They just said, people don't like Teferi, we're suspending it. That's the difference to me. We got that clarity with Pioneer. If people aren't playing your format, I get it. You got to ban stuff. If they have that data on Historic, it's very odd that they chose not to share it for Historic when they did share it for Pioneer, which leads me to believe Historic doesn't have a people quitting because of Teferi problem. They just want to erase Teferi from Magic because no one likes it. So I don't know. It's just a catch-22. And I honestly don't know how I feel about it. I'm salty about it. That doesn't mean it was wrong to ban Teferi. I think Teferi's a stupid design. So I don't know. I don't know the right answer, especially when Field of the Dead is still legal. This is what people care about. This is the shit going on.
I know
right
what
now.
people care about. People care about games that are designed well, and a game that's designed well was designed by Brainstorm Brewery listener Cameron Duker, who designed a game called Redline, which is currently on Kickstarter. We will have that link in the show notes. And Cameron makes really good staffing decisions, including asking yours truly to contribute some flavor text to the game. So, hey, if you thought, I wonder if Jason would be good at writing flavor text. I don't know. You tell me. Why don't you go to the Kickstarter, which is in the show notes, and check out the Redline game. It's kind of like, I guess, like the BattleTech card game.
It looked interesting. I looked at the Kickstarter.
You would attack their library, you know? So you have like mechs fight each other. And then,
so did you do, what flavor text did you do, Jason? I need to know which cards have Jason E. Alt written.
Well, I tweeted a few today. So if you go back to my tweets from Monday, I actually previewed some of the cards. So you'll see some of the game mechanics, some of the characters from the lore, and you'll see my flavor text that I contributed to the game. So it's, it was a good time doing it. I really hope that the Kickstarter gets funded. I contributed myself today, and it's just another thing I could put on my resume, so Wizards can like hire me and then like fire me after a couple of weeks. They're like, "Hey, we hired you to write flavor text. Do you have a finance website and podcast?" I'd be like, "Yeah, we can't tell you the names and mechanics of cards 4 months early. You understand, right?" So
is that how that? Do you actually know anything about that process? Do they show people a card?
They
or what? Like, what's the?
I feel like they have some information. Otherwise, how could you?
Yeah, that's what it's probably like an art director blurb, right? Where you get like a paragraph.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking you probably don't actually see the cards. I could be wrong.
Well,
it probably depends on the card. Like there's some cards you don't.
I'll try to get the job, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, that's
how excited they are to have.
We're all just making stuff up. Yeah. We have no idea here. So let's move right along then into Breaking Bulk.
Breaking Bulk time. Breaking Bulk time. Break.
Oh, yeah, Breaking Bulk. There's so much good stuff.
It's a pick. Breaking Bulk. The end.
I've got a... What set is this? Jesus.
I don't know. Hulk is the only rhyme I had for bulk. Is there anything else there? I don't know how you can work Hulk into it, though.
Sulk?
What?
So S-U-L-K.
Also skulk, the magic keyword.
Yeah. That was a keyword for like 6 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. It's on one relevant card, though.
Also...
Right? It's on Vampire. It's on the Vampire.
Wasn't there a character named Shulk from Smash Brothers?
There is a... Is or was
a
Shulk in Smash,
Xenoblade, I think, but yeah.
Well, he's
a Smash.
He was from Xenoblade, but people don't play Xenoblade. They're just like, what is Xenoblade when they're playing Breath of the Wild or Smash Brothers?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what half of the characters in Smash, what games they come from.
Like it's probably that.
I mean, you can guess Fire Emblem or Pokemon, and you're like,
you are usually correct.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's a lot. Not that
it's a bad thing. People. I mean, like that's great.
I didn't know what Fire Emblem was until Super Smash Melee.
So. Jesus, you uncultured little. Now I get to be the Jason.
Tell us more about the Fire Emblems, DJ. Tell us about all those games. How you've probably played maybe one of them.
I've played most of them, which is like 13 or 14.
Why?
Oh.
Because I like tactics RPGs and they're good games. Most of them are good games. A couple of them are bad, but
this is the not. And everyone complains at us for talking about things that aren't Magic. Now we're really going to make them mad because we're
there's
legit
a
just
lot
talking
of
about
Magic
other games.
in Fire Emblem.
I'm
there's
really
emblems. There's fire.
We're legit talking about other games now.
Go to the Fire Emblem games for all your Fire Emblem needs. If you need emblems, if you need fires.
Well, actually, though, you know where you could get both emblems and balls of fire? It's our sponsor, Channel Fireball, where you can go to pick up any of the cards we're going to talk about today. You can become a member of CFB Pro, have access to all the incredible content from the stable of pros at the website, and they've always got a buy list promotion or two going on, both for pros and non-pro members. So big shout out to our sponsor, as always, Channel Fireball. As Jason would say, your home for all Channel and Fireball needs.
All right, so my pick is a Ixalan, the first set, XLN, an Ixalan rare or mythic.
Cool.
And it is white.
Go
I
on.
said it's a rare or mythic. Jason's
Go
getting
on.
old. This is hearing loss.
Yeah.
It's a white rare or mythic from Ixalan, no reprints, and it's a creature.
Is it the Trapjaw? Is that what it's called?
That's
Ripjaw?
from Rivals of Ixalan, which is why I specifically said the set code.
Yeah, but
it's from
I heard you say
Ixalan
the
or
set code,
Rivals of Ixalan.
I heard you say set code, but like the mistake you're making is thinking that I knew which set that card was from. It's just an Ixalan card. All I know, it's a dinosaur.
Is it Zetalpa?
No, Zetalpa's been reprinted 86 trillion times, unfortunately.
It's a white creature?
Yep.
And it's a rare or mythic.
Tell me it's
Ixalan.
creature type at least.
Dinosaur. Doesn't help much.
Is it the one that protects your other dinosaurs? Is it the one that prevents damage?
Nope. See, the fact that you can't get this means it's a pretty good one.
I mean, that depends on what the price is.
It's like $3 buy list.
Do what?
It's like $3 buy list.
$3
Is it
buy
the
list.
Avatar?
Okay, well then
Yep,
is...
Awakening Sun's Avatar.
Oh, there you go.
Awakening Sun's Avatar is a 8-mana 7/7 dinosaur avatar. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, destroy all non-dinosaur creatures.
Yeah, card's cool.
The TCG Marketplace is $4.41. I have gotten $3 for this in the past, and I find it in bulk mythics because it's the definition of a Timmy.
It costs a lot of mana.
Oh yeah, it is Timmy as heck.
Yeah, so you play it from your hand, you blow up some non-dinosaurs, but this was definitely a card that players opened looking for a search for Azcanta, and then they tossed it in a box and never touched it.
You're right, absolutely. There's no way anyone's pulling that out of bulk. That card has definitely flown under the radar.
If Magic Fests were happening, this is a card where I would pull it out of a binder, put it in a $2 pile, and then people would look at me really weird. Especially when I put their Death Shadow in a $1 pile.
Yeah.
Like that's the
Have you had that
life
experience?
Comes at you fast. You gotta.
Have you had that
adapt.
experience before, where somebody like thinks that you just don't know what you're doing because you do something they don't understand like that?
every second of every day.
This guy's trying to rip me off because he says this card's only worth $1. This card's always been $10, and then no, this card's worth $1, man.
Every second of every day. The competitive players are always like, is my Aether Flux Marvel still worth something? Wait, why are you buying Smothering Tide? Like, it's every player.
Yeah. All right. I've got an M19 blue uncommon.
Aether Gust?
Nope. Aether Gust, it is not.
You said Aether. It's Aether.
The Psychic Corrosion.
Also, Aether Gust is in
20, yeah.
Stop saying Aether. It's Aether.
Whatever, man.
It's actually Aether, I think.
I know, which is why
the
I
A
say
and the E
Aether.
together is
It's Artificer, Jason.
But just, it may be, Aether is pretentious.
Hold up.
Let's not say Ether.
No. Listen, buddy. All right. Well, whatever. JJ can put in the Clippy voice saying ether because it's pronounced ether, Jason.
It can't possibly be, though.
Okay. Well, Google thinks it is.
Oh, okay. Well, Google thinks I'm not cheating on my wife because I leave my phone at home, so...
Google also knows
Google
exactly
know?
what kind of plank boards you need next, so...
American pronunciation is ether. The British pronunciation is, let's see. Ether.
Aether. Yeah, but they pronounce THs as Fs and Rs as Es and Es as
Anyways,
Rs.
point is it's ether.
Like, who cares what...
And it's not any of those cards. So you guys can keep guessing, though. It's a blue uncommon.
I said Psychic Corrosion.
Oh, yeah, it is Psychic Corrosion. You did it.
Whenever you draw a card, each opponent mills 2. And now it actually says each opponent mills 2, and not each opponent puts the top 2 cards of the library into the graveyard.
Which is cool, right? Seeing the word
mill is a keyword.
On cards.
It only took them 30 years. They did it.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, Jason, go ahead.
I have a card that has got 3 printings. It was originally in Magic Origins. It's an uncommon green card.
Elemental Bond?
Elemental Bondage.
That card's pretty good.
Card's a buck.
What's the new? That's the one that makes 3/3s, right?
It's when you play a creature with 3 or greater power, you draw a card.
Oh, it's that one. Okay.
And this may have been made obsolete.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
by, of course, a 2021 card, but
I don't think it makes it obsolete. I think if your deck somehow thrives off of 3 power creatures, you already had one, and if it thrives off of 4+ power creatures, now you have 2. You know,
but potentially this is like maybe it's like a budget replacement for
Garrick's Uprising is the other. I believe what you're talking about.
No, I was thinking the one from the Ravnica set.
Oh,
Guardian Pact.
Guardians Pact.
Guardian Project.
Yeah.
Guardians.
Guardian Project is
GP. Just call it GP. Like if you don't know a guy's name, but you think it starts with a T, just call him T Dog. He's like, my name's Jeff. It's like, yeah, classic T Dog. It's a good replacement for G Dog, for sure.
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Yeah, you going there? Something with Corbin? Yeah.
No.
He was just thinking about how no one called him Sea Dog back in high school, and now he's like upset.
No, I was actually just trying to remember.
What's the point of stealing the ball off Blake Griffin if no one's going to chant Sea Dog?
I was trying to think if Jason had given us the clues yet for the card.
He did. He said green card from
we
Origins that had 3 printings, and I nailed it.
Yeah, we already did. I was trying to get ready to type it into the spreadsheet. And
the name's Bond. Elemental Bond.
Yeah, you can put this in after. This is the supercut of us not knowing what the fuck we're
Elemental
talking about.
Aether.
JJ. Origins, okay.
Aether.
Do you expect me to draw a card when you play a creature with power greater than 3? No, Elemental Bond, I expect you to draw... No, wait, what was the first thing you said? Yeah, I expect you to draw a card, innit?
All right, well, there you go, everybody.
I'll fucking glass you, mate. I swear on me, ma'am.
Well, as everybody knows, last week we did a mailbag episode, which was always an interesting experience. So we have a few more emails this week to read that we either didn't get to or we have received since then. Also, though, let us know, listeners, if you actually do like the mailbag episodes, if you find them useful or tedious or what, because we don't know. They definitely hit a little different. If you hate
mailbag episodes, email brainstormbrew@gmail.com and let us know not to read emails on the cast.
Yeah, but
and we
also
will read
let us
your email on our next mailbag episode, making fun of you.
Don't
do a mailbag episode. I'll do a dumb voice.
That is exactly what we will do, actually.
They're a waste of time. I want finance advice, not somebody.
All right, DJ, go ahead. Read us an email, man.
This one's called Backpack Grinds from Gregory. Hey guys, in a past life before life got so busy with career, relationships, etc., I used to grind events as a backpack trader, often with Jason and Ryan. It was a lot of fun, and I find myself missing it. It seemed like people were willing to give up value in order to trade up their lower value cards into format staples. But all at once, it seemed like that attitude changed. My question is, does this role still exist in any meaningful capacity? Obviously, with COVID putting everything on hold, it's not possible, but can you give some tips for someone who hasn't been as active to get back into it? Thanks, guys. Love the podcast. Eat a dick, Jason. Greg.
So I will.
Great email.
First of all, I will.
Great email.
I think it's important.
So if you are getting stuff for people locally, they'll give up value to not have to do anything. If you're at a GP, you don't have to deal with a backpack grinder. You can just be like, look, I'll deal with somebody else.
Well, it's hard to deal with backpack grinders anyways. CFB did a very good job of banning them off the floor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So if you were getting stuff for people locally and they're just like, I just want you to take stuff out of my binder and then put the card I want in my hand, you can get some value doing that. You're providing a service, you're being compensated for it.
Yep.
You're not getting anybody, you are providing value. You're allowing them to turn their cards, which they don't want, into a card they do want, and like, there's a fee associated with that, but like, how much would they get? It's like, you feel free to eBay the cards and then buy the singles, and then you'll figure out it's much easier to deal with me.
Yes.
So
that's
what I've shifted to.
Your goal was to be the local buy list, assuming there is not a local game store already filling that role. The concept of a backpack trader at even just like larger scale PTQs or SCGs or GPs or whatever is definitely dead. Number one, smartphones obviously contributed to that. Number two,
but we should specify what we mean when we say smartphones. Smartphones made the trades take too long to make money doing it. it wasn't that we couldn't trick people anymore. It was that everyone's like, oh, I'm going to use the internet. I'm hacking the Gibson. And it just, everything took forever.
And to be fair, the people who were good at it, certainly what I did back in the day, was not try to rip people off. It was, like you mentioned in the email, and trading up, trading down, because the buy list numbers on the cards that I would trade into would be higher than the buy list on the cards I traded out of, even if the retail was the same. That was always how I approached it back in the day. I mean, yeah, maybe you make your 10% or whatever on some, it's like $4 and it's forfeit, whatever, right? But no one was, certainly our group was not out there actively trying to scam people out of these things, right? We always had the same approach to it that Jason's taking, but what that meant over the years has changed. So go ahead, DJ.
Yeah, and there was just, smartphones as a whole, like a large part of it was just the player becomes obsessed with the number on the smartphone instead of just like the actual liquidity of the card, and just like they're like, oh, TCG says this card is 1745 and your pile says 1736, therefore I need to flip 5 minutes for a bulk rare that I really want. It's that happened. But vendors as a whole and stores just like became more streamlined and efficient over the past decade. Like the operations that exist at Magic Fests used to be like backpack grinders who spent $500 on a banner, and now they are like organized companies with payroll and systems in place to like gain the efficiency of all of that workload and employees. So like 95, for example, the company that I'm employed by, like we can pay 90% of TCG low on a giant pile of cards and then flip them for a 10% margin overall. So like the backpack grinder that used to exist was trying to pay 60 or 70% and then sell those cards to us. But now like we have the organized systems in place and the advertising structure and the marketing and all that to like get those cards and like remove the middleman. I mean, remove the middleman, like, right? Like a vendor is still a middleman to get the card to the player, but like,
of course, sure.
It just removes that concept of like person who says they're a store and has 20 grand in cards in their backpack. Like that role is just sort of dead outside the local level because of vendor efficiency and buy list efficiency as a whole. Like you can see,
and the people, the 10 people who did that at GPs and made experiences worse for everyone who said, oh, I'm going to trade some cards. I don't want to deal with a dealer. I'm going to trade with some other players. And then they're just sitting down. They've got a binder open to something fancy. That player sits down and just gets hosed by them. Or the experience just isn't, it just was never an enjoyable meet another player experience. You were working with a dealer who was camouflaged, and that wasn't often very fun for people.
Or a person
because
who
you had
wanted
different
to call
expectations.
themselves a dealer and it wasn't.
Yes, you're right, even more so. But I have to say, Channel Fireball put a policy in place, Channel Fireball events, when they took over the Magic Fest circuit. And it actually caught a bunch of flack online initially where they said their language said you can be removed for trading blah, blah, blah. And they basically, the internet spent, half a day mad. And so people had to be like, no, this is not, no one's trying to stop you from trading at a GP. What we're trying to do is get these dozen grinders who are ruining this experience for everybody off of the floor because they're hurting the vendors who are paying us money to be there. Or if they work with them, it's still like they're still eating up some number of cards that could have gone directly to the dealers. It just didn't work for anybody. So when DJ says the market's become more efficient in the past 10 years or so, I think it's really interesting to watch and see what has happened as sort of the second generation of vendors has come up. Because, 25 years ago, you had that first wave of people, right? 20 years ago, as Magic started to take off at more than a local level, you had the people who would just load up their backpacks and go to an event and call themselves a dealer. And eventually they become dealers and so on. But you had these people who just kind of fell into it by being there first. And some of them succeeded and some of them didn't. But then the next wave, the really data-driven, streamline the process type people, like Caffrey, who we had on last week or the week before, that is sort of the second generation of vendors coming in. And it's been fascinating to watch them make the market more efficient. Because if you think about it, it's kind of a microcosm of capitalism. And the idea of the free market and the idea that markets become more efficient over time and all of these sort of economic theories. It's very interesting with Magic because you have, it's not regulated by the government. It's not beholden to any of these rules it should be. But in some ways, we've gotten to see an experiment of a new market go from nothing to, like DJ just described the process now with 95, where there's just so much data and efficiency being built in. And that's good for the game as a whole, even if it obviously vastly changes what it looks like to try to go trade at a GP. So that was a good question. That was a fun email.
Next up is question about MTG Finance from Ken. How often do you pick up budget under $1 cards from sets in recent years? I speculate a lot on Commander singles. I check out MTG stocks daily and react to spikes. I'm an avid watcher of your YouTube videos. I do MTG Finance casually and sell on TCG Player /eBay. I play Commander weekly with longtime friends. Thank you. Thank you for calling us a YouTuber.
We made it.
We have dozens of YouTube subscribers, I'll have you know.
Dozens.
In terms of sets from recent years, there's still room to make money on those when the card's not obvious. Guardian Project's one we brought up earlier, where it's a really good example of that. Where there's still sometimes cards that are super obvious, like Smothering Ties. Nobody's like throwing that into bulkware bins. Everybody realizes that's White's savior card for Commander. But stuff like Guardian Project, stuff like Awakening Sun's Avatar is another really good example where you can pinpoint cards and just be like, in 3 years, if this dodges all those reprints, it's going to be something. Sometimes you get hit by a billion reprints. Atali's a good example of this, where like you might see that card and be like, oh yeah, that's it. And then it gets Walmart printed to death and you're sad.
I thought Atali was I'm with you. I thought Atali was going to be good for a long time, and it's just like almost a whole career.
But in terms of how often do you pick up budget cards from sets in recent years, I this question sort of skewed because we don't do that anymore.
I guess do that, yeah.
But like our main operations are just like buying collections, then moving all of the cards in those collections. Like you can analyze a spreadsheet and look at my picks of the week from the past 2 months and go, but DJ, but you have some of these cards for sale on TCG Player. Yeah, because I don't like cherry pick nickels and dimes anymore in terms of like, oh, I can make $3 extra if I pull these 2 cards out of my batch that were going to be listed. Like, my cards
you just got to move them. Like, it's all about stuff, as you scale up, each individual transaction matters less, and it's all about volume. That's why the big box stores, they operate on margins of 1 or 2%, and they just get there. But it still comes out to billions of dollars because of volume, and that's where Magic gets. Obviously, we're not operating on those kinds of margins, but the principle is the same. You'd rather just
if you can do the low volume, high margin stuff, you're not going to get there with bulk rares. I would think you would get there with like promising EDH foils that, you know, where the card goes from like $1 to $3, and then that means the foil goes from $2 to $7.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I don't like foils for EDH, so you know, really that sort of model is just, it's tough because when you get bit by fees at both ends, when you get bit by shipping, buying from somebody, and then you get bit by shipping, selling it out, and if you want to be the cheapest on TCG Player, you're going to pay the shipping. So if you're getting hit by fees on both ends, having like $1 cards, unless you're selling 100 copies of one card to one person, the fees are just going to eat you alive. So like you start to shift to either just being like, look, I'll pay buy list prices on $20 cards and sell them for $2 under TCG low on Twitter just to move them. Or, you know, you'll figure out if you're speculating, it'll be the stuff that like can actually go somewhere. Because a 10-cent card getting played, going from played to not played, goes from like 10 cents to $2, and that's like a pretty big deal. But like,
so
how did you get him at 10 cents? You basically can't. So we just, as we've matured as financiers, we've shifted away from the double fee type cards.
Right. So, but putting myself in the shoes of somebody who isn't doing this the way we're doing it, if you do just want to pull aside a few cards from recent sets and keep them in a spec box, I still have a spec box. You're right that uncommons, and even from recent sets, a lot of ways I would have thought they were just dead, but Veil of Summer is $7 and the card's banned in standard. Vampire of the New Moon, of the Dire Moon, is an uncommon from M20 that's not played. It's $2. I do think that there are some opportunities in a crazy way. There may be more opportunities with uncommons than there are rares, because the rares almost never get missed.
Yeah.
they have so much more attention devoted to them that they almost never get missed. Whereas something like, I'm not going to say Veil of Summer because that card's broken, but Vampire the Dire Moon's a good example of a card that, it's got Death Touch Life. I mean, it's a popular combination. Like, those things happen. So, when you're looking at some of the newer sets, something like Soul Guide Lantern, is that the new Relic of Progenitus? I don't know, but maybe. Hydra's Growth, stuff like that. These things that are breaking bulks, they're breaking bulks for a reason. And it's a segment about pulling bulk. It's not a segment about pick of the week, but often, I mean, those cards have gone up in price, and they didn't before, and that's why they're breaking bulk. So you're right, there is an opportunity in those things, and I would look towards those uncommons. But this is very much if you are somebody who's, I want to put the time I can into this, and I'm going through cards, and I want to set aside the 10 copies of Hydra's Growth I come across and throw them in a box and see if it's $5 in 2 years. Like, you can do that, right? If that's how you want to interact. That's not how we interact with sort of the Magic finance side of things, but breaking bulk is great for stuff like that because those are the kind of cards that shoot up in price later on or climb up in price later on.
Breaking bulk is where we remind you to go yank out all that stuff that you said, this is bulk, but I don't want to move this for bulk. You look at Dovin's Veto and you're like, I'm not shipping Dovin's Veto for half a cent.
Yeah.
And then a year on, Dovin's Veto is the 10th most played card on EDH Rec in the past week.
Well, you know what? Dovin's Veto is actually a great example, Jason, because it's only $1.
Yeah.
So there's a promo version of it that's $3, but honestly, that's the kind of stuff you want to be looking at. Jason's right. Using EDH Rec as a resource there is
when everybody's drafting, when everyone's drafting War of the Spark and Dovin's Veto is worth literal nothing, do you want to ship that out with all the other cards in War of the Spark that are bulk? Or do you look at people like, okay, people are playing Dovin's Veto, it's currently 9 cents, but can it be worth 90 in a year? And yes, it can. So, like, I don't know if I want to buy a bunch of Dovin's Vetoes, but I'm definitely not going to bulk them out. I'm going to yank them out, and when I bulk everything else out, I'm going to put them in a box, and then when somebody reminds me to check the price, and was like, oh, this is $1.40? This is 73 cents on a buy list? Yep.
Yeah, and that's why, Jason talked about the fees. That's why this sort of stuff, we don't really advocate speccing in the sense of buying things online and hoping to flip them for later, except in some rare opportunities. But it's just hard. It's just hard to play that game. You get hit with the fees both ways, blah, blah, blah. But setting things aside as you come across them or trading for them at your local store, back, when you can do that again anyways, and then setting them aside, that's the kind of thing that we really advocate here. All right. Well, moving on from that, I guess
how do you move on from that?
I guess it's time for pick of the week.
Sure.
My pick of the week is Matlock on DVD.
I'm going to order you some Matlock on DVD. Send it to your house right now.
Pick of the week. Pick of the week. Pick of the week. Time for the pick of the week.
My pick of the week is Deep Glow Skate. It was one of 8 trillion cards reprinted in Double Masters. It is currently pre-selling for around $2. This is a card that's gotten hit by quite a few reprints, surprisingly. But I think it still comes back to like 5 or 6 eventually. It's just, it has the words double each kind of counter on target permanents, any number of target permanents. So like, it is blue, but I think this card just continues to press on.
Well, but like the most recent deck that runs it though is like Roll-esque. This is an Atraxa card, and the farther we get away from Atraxa being a card, Atraxa being in Double Masters itself, so it's like no longer $100 card, it's $20 now. But the farther we get away from Atraxa, it's sort of like, what's really running Deep Glow Skate? Are people jamming this in their Niambi Faithful Healer decks?
Yeah, but like it's also true that if at any point they print something blue that works with Deep Glow Skate,
they absolutely will later. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Like,
so DJ, the card was
getting farther from Atraxa, but she's still the most popular commander in the past 2 years, or second most behind Muldrotha. But like, she's still just popular. It's just Atraxa is just such a popular card.
All right, so Deep Close Gate was
original. Number 7 in the past week too, for whatever reason.
Right, because it's just
people like to play it. Yeah, it's just
there's
popular.
so many ways you can build it. Like a lot of those are Infect, where you don't need Deep Close Gate, but a lot of those are Super Friends.
Yeah. So Deep Close Gate was originally in C16, and I at the time I thought this was the stupidest card ever, and I thought it was going to be worth money forever. Blah blah blah. It was at one point $15. It was in Mystery Boosters, Commander Anthology Volume 2, and Double Masters, and the Double Masters version is currently all of $2. So
that's got to be
certainly cheap.
I'm not like this isn't. If we gave confidence levels to picks, that I'd give this like a 6.5 or a 7. It's not like it's not a slam dunk in my opinion. It's not like my most like super obvious pick. It's obviously going up cards.
Yeah.
But it's still like it's just a very powerful card for cheap, and I think you pick it, and I think it's good.
Okay. I'm gonna go with a Jason favorite here. Curtain's Call.
What one?
Curtain's Call. It's not on the spreadsheet. Not on the spreadsheet though. No one's picked it.
Because I haven't picked it since it was printed and it was bulk rare.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those. See, we talked about cards you should not forget about. This is one of them because we talked about this card a lot. It started off as a bulk rare. Jason's right when it was first in C16. It was all 50 cents and it spiked up, but it has recently, and I say recently, in the year 2020, it's gone from about 350 to just over 4. And the graph is starting to show some just small ticks up. So it's not exactly a second spike per se, but this card did climb from $1.50 in the beginning of 2019 to being $3.50 at the beginning of 2020. And now it's starting to tick past $4. There's just no way that by the time we do 2021, it's not $7 or $8, I think. Curtain's Call. Destroy 2 target creatures. It's an instant. It's 6 mana, but has Undaunted. Costs 1 less for each opponent. So usually it's 3 mana, destroy 2 creatures. It's pretty nutty. So yeah. I had another one queued up, but I actually think of the 2, Curtain's Call is the one more likely to pop soon. So I'll save the other one for next week.
Mine's 100% based on speculation. So the fact that they released a picture of Omnath with a white arm makes me think that we're probably going to get a white Omnath with landfall. Now that is, even if it's not a landfall deck, I think land matters will be good because
we know that land matters is the theme of Zendikar, and then that's
so
it's
even if it's
a huge return, I think.
So even if it's not landfall, the deck you build, you will benefit from having land. So having cards that have landfall will still be good, because like the other 2, the red green Omnath and Temur Omnath are both landfall cards. True, but even if Omnath Blacklist doesn't specifically reference landfall or even have a when a land comes into playability, the rest of the deck will want to give you a lot of lands. So based on the fact that Zendikar is going to be like a landy set and we're getting an Omnath with white in it, my pick is Admonition Angel, which is $5 on sites like TCG Player, but like it's starting to creep up to like 10 other places. So I think if you can get this under $6, you absolutely do that.
Yeah, that card's cool. I'm excited for this return to Zendikar. I won't lie, for a lot of reasons, but we'll talk about them more as we get a little closer.
I gotta build another. I have 3 Omnath decks, and now I have to build a 4th. So
allies.
Yeah,
Ally Encampment is not my pick this week. It will be at some point before we get there. Allies are coming back. I'm feeling it.
Cohort's a sweet ability, dude.
Yeah, rip. I think that they recognize their missteps from Shadow's block. They actually, you got to feel kind of bad for them. Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon, yeah.
What?
I feel like, and Zendikar, that time period, this is what I'm getting at. They set up this whole big story with a return to Zendikar and then return to Innistrad and this whole big story with the Eldrazi. And what they lost along the way, and because they had this big storyline set up that ran through both of them, there's no way to change anything. But the people liked Zendikar for the adventure theme and the full art lands and the lands matter stuff. And then you got Eldrazi and Rise of the Eldrazi, and that was cool. But no one loved Zendikar because of the Eldrazi, and no one loved Innistrad because of the Eldrazi. So it's like they did these returns to some of their most popular planes, and you just outside perception looking in from what it seems like the internet kind of thought about those things. They weren't particularly successful returns because they strayed away from what made those planes so popular in the first place. So all of that Jason's talking about Zendikar, I mean, I agree. I think we can expect a lot of OG Zendikar flavor here.
And Admonition Angel's moving already, so clearly other people are kind of on my same wavelength, and I realize it's 100% speculative, and that hasn't been my typical bent lately. I've been like, hey, let's wait and see what people are building, but I don't think you need to wait to see that Admonition Angel is going to be good in a deck that is built. Mm-hmm. My Temur Omnath deck is going to subtract 10 cards and add some white stuff. So
nice.
All
right. Well, I think that does it for us this week here on Brainstorm Brewery. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. A final shout out to our sponsor channel, Fireball. Next week on Monday, we will be streaming on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Brainstorm Brewery. We will be streaming live gaming. So come check that out. We've had a lot of fun over the past month or so doing that every other week on YouTube. So if you're interested in that, we're playing some non-Magic games and basically just hanging out with our listeners for a couple hours before we podcast. So people have always asked for a chance to kind of hang out, a live episode type feel, and that's sort of what we're going for with that. Is just letting people hang out with us in a public way while we play some games. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week here on Brainstorm Brewery.